the official Zoomcast of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. He's an American guitar legend and musical director for the Conan O'Brien Show. Hear untold stories from Jimmy and his musical guests. They will talk music, its influence, culture, and future on The Green Room with Jimmy Vivino with special guest Danny Zelisko.
Jimmy Vivino once again here in the green room. I'm going to take a deep breath before I read you this, but what do all of these people have in common? Pink Floyd, Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Frank Zappa, Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, Bill Graham, Stephen Stills, Axl Rose, Carlos Santana, The Grateful Dead, Perry Farrell, Sam Kinison, Rodney Dangerfield, The Police, Cheap Trick, Kiss, Nirvana, Talking Heads, Pat Benatar, and our good friend David Fishoff. Well, what they have in common is our guest today, Danny Zelisko, whose book, All Excess Occupation Concert Promoter, is out right now, and we're going to have a nice chat with him. Hey, I see you. Okay. How are you, man?
Hi, Jimmy Joe.
Oh. Well, you know, we got to have a saint. We're Italians. I need to have a saint in the middle. I don't know why, you know.
I understand.
Yeah, I do. You know, I feel like we grew up in different houses together. because I had a grandmother who was an immigrant, you know, and always got jokes wrong and stories wrong and funny stuff happened. And I think you had immigrant grandparents also, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Russian, Polish.
Right. From the north side, right? You guys were up in Chicago.
They lived on the south side. They were from, they lived the whole time that I knew them, they lived in North Riverside.
Okay. That's cool.
Just past Kittyland and the racetrack and all that.
Okay. All that stuff that's gone. It's probably all gone.
Yeah. It's like, you know, Cumberland, First Avenue, that kind of thing.
Okay. I know Mike Bloomfield was from the Gold Coast.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, those guys. You know that Mike Bloomfield's father had the concession for every restaurant where if you turn a sugar shaker over, it says Bloomfield on the bottom, or the coffee makers. And here was this kid sitting with Roy Ruby on a street corner playing blues with a tin cup, you know.
My kind of guy.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you were in Chicago as a kid, right? Did you graduate from high school there?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you get to the South Side to see anything going on down there, Muddy or any of those guys? Or
no. I moved when I was 17.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I wasn't going to bars and shows.
No bars.
I went to the regular auditoriums and things like that. But no, I wasn't allowed into bars.
But you had bands in the basement, right? You had your own bands. You were rehearsing in the basement, probably.
We did that. We did that, and we rehearsed in other people's basements and garages, wherever you know. And then after one or two times, you get so sick of you, they throw you out.
Yeah, always the drummer's house. The drummer usually. So what do you play? What do you?
Drums.
Okay, beautiful. There's so much to talk about that. You're a musician first, right? So what feeds you, you know, like we all love our records and we love music and we listen to the radio, we got everything, but what makes a kid say, you know, what Bill Graham is doing, I want to do that, I think I want to do that? I mean, that's so selective in the business.
You know, something about him and his attitude, his snarl, his laughter, the way I read about him for years before I actually met him.
Yeah.
And I loved him from a distance, you know, and I knew we were going to be friends one day, and we were. We became really, really close. And I enjoyed that. It was during the last 5 years that he was around. And I realized, I mean, he either was clearing the paths for me to hang out with him very swiftly without any thought, or he didn't have anything to do and no social life. Because and we had a great social life. Now, I'm not talking about throughout all the big years. I'm talking about between 55 and 60 for him. I mean, it's so weird for me.
Yeah, he
to
died
think
young. He died
he was
young.
60.
Yeah.
I think of that. I mean, I'm 10% older than him.
I'm
And
66 myself, you know,
me
you can
too.
see.
So, you know, that, I mean, he always seemed like he was so much older and wiser than me, you know, and he
I
was
think he
older.
was a,
He was 25 years older than me, but when you back it up, and he was 60 years old, and he had talked to me a number of times. He goes, you know, the grind of this, it's killing me. It's too much. I've done enough. When do I stop? You know, that kind of thing. Well, he stopped. He got stopped in his tracks.
well, I
That
guess
was-
he was kind of Yoda-like for you, you know, kind of a little bit Yoda-like, sort of a master. Sort
you
of,
know,
he's like a guy who had all the knowledge.
but you see, from a distance as a young kid, because remember in the 60s, I didn't turn 15 till 69.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm same age as you, so same thing. I graduated in 72 and I went straight to Berkeley and I met him right after high school. I immediately left. And
I saw him earlier because when I was 13, I started going to the Fillmore, and he would come out and introduce every act, from the opening act to the middle act to the main act, and he was a compelling figure on stage, man. You know, I mean, he had that voice. He had a great voice too, and
oh yeah,
and he was a legend very quickly. You know, he became a legend very quickly. Bill Graham's, you know, Fillmore East, Fillmore West. I never got to the Fillmore West till much later. I played there with Laura Nero, and Bill was still alive.
wow.
And she said to me, and I think I told the story maybe to Fishoff too, or Shep, one of you guys, right? And he took me in his office, and all those great posters were there. It was almost like a dream, and he was really nice, and everything was piled up. And then when I heard that he was going to stop because tickets were going to $10 and start Winterland, the T-shirt company, everybody was like, there's no money in T-shirts. Wrong. That's a smart guy, right?
Yeah. He didn't miss a beat, that's for sure. But you know, you got to think back to those days. Like nowadays, you know, everybody knows about riders and everybody knows about ticket prices and everybody knows about a lot of things. But back then, none of us knew anything about anything. We didn't have a roadmap. Bill was pretty much the roadmap that started it for everybody. He was the one who set up shop on each coast and showed everybody on each coast how it was done. And around the same time, there are a number of other promoters around his age, or maybe a little bit younger, who are now, you know, in their mid to late 70s. And they had their places in Philadelphia and in Boston and Chicago, Denver. And there were places like, you know, there were the guys that started the whole thing of banding together to somehow loosely form a network where these people could come in from England to New York or wherever, usually New York, and then move through the country and then fly back or turn around and deadhead back the other way and get up more dates. There were key people other than Bill, agents that were really instrumental in making that whole thing happen. Frank Barcelona was probably the leader in that regard. He had premier talent in New York, and I mean, he was the agent for the Beatles when they came to town.
Sure. And then there was Sid, you know, and those promoters too in New York, but there were promoters. I wanted to get to that too, because we being from New York, you know, I know Delsner and Sid Bernstein and you know, Richard Nader, all the New York guys. Howard Stein had the Capitol Theater. He was another great one. Epi out in the Long Island, and Alan Pepper down at the Bottom Line. These guys, you know, I knew, but we forget, if we're from the West Coast or East Coast, there's a whole country in the middle. And this is where you come into it, going to Arizona and starting up, you know, major, you know, work.
I visited out here during my senior year in high school. I took my first plane trip and flew to San Francisco, experienced that, went down to LA, experienced that. I'd never been there. It was 1972. Went back and graduated from high school, and then I moved to Berkeley, moved back to Chicago, moved to Arizona, Fini. So when I started doing shows, I was 19 out here, and it didn't last very long, but it was a start. And you know what happens in the business is once you get involved in it, you enrolled into it. I mean, you're part of a moving life form that moves and presses forward, and stuff happens within that life form. And if you're lucky, you don't get run over or thrown out of it, you know. And especially when you're me, it's like I found myself in the most unbelievable situations, and I go, "How did I get here?" But I didn't ask out loud because somebody might think I'm an idiot if I do that. You gotta belong. And when you're into it and you don't know why, you have to stick around as close to the flame as possible to see if you want to get burned or not. And I did. So it wasn't like a dedicated decision to come out here and be a promoter. Although when I did come out here, I got to admit, it was in the back of my head, like if I'm going to get anywhere, it's going to be in a place that I'm comfortable in. And I was more comfortable out here in a very short period of time than I was in Chicago with all the terrible weather conditions and so forth. I mean, you just never know what you're going to wake up to. And then there's those 6 months of the year between November and May. I mean, where it's still snowing there. I mean, I can't handle that. So coming here, I saw when I did come here on that trip, I saw John Mayall play at this place called the Celebrity Theater, a place in the Round. And John was pretty big then. He sold out the place, and he was fantastic. I think Room to Move was out when just before that, which I thought was his best record.
With John Mark and John Allman, those
I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love this theater and I love this town because they had a radio station which for the time matched the times and played most everything that I was listening to. And if they didn't, I could get them to the point where finally they gave me a slot on Sunday afternoons for an hour. It's called the English Import Hour.
Oh, great. I didn't know you did radio. Oh, yeah.
Well, God, I've been on all different kinds of radio things. Never in a paid regular form, but I somehow managed to squeeze my way in there and perform content for them, which they needed apparently, but they didn't have a budget for it. So I was like, well, I can promote my shows. I can talk with some of my rock star friends on the phone with the audience. And they love that. And, you know, so I've been on 3 different radio stations over the years, but not all the time. I'm currently not doing it anymore. But the bottom line was I did see opportunity here when I came out and then went back and I came out again. It just spoke to me and it said, this is where you need to go. Because, I mean, what's the hardest thing to do? Start a business, start a career. What's even harder? Doing it where everybody else is already doing it.
Yeah.
So I figured get out of Chicago. I tell this to people who want to promote shows all the time. I say, go somewhere, go to a secondary market, a tertiary market where you can cut your teeth on this stuff and learn the craft, learn the trade, and then start moving back to your hometown if that's important to you. But if it isn't, stay there and have a good life. You don't want to be in a big city competing all the time. It's a grind. That's what'll kill you. Because once you get once you get past a certain point with experience, knowledge, information, you can do anything, anywhere. So you just need that information and that experience in order to do it and figure out whether or not it's worth the fight. Now, I mean, here in Arizona, flash forward 40-something, 5 years later, whatever it is, and I'm competing with 3 pretty big entities here, all of which used to work for me.
So you were tied in with Clear Channel and Live Nation, right? Both.
Yeah, I had a company called Evening Star that I started in the late part of '76 because I just started booking a nightclub and they didn't want to book Taj Mahal. So I said, well, let me book it myself. I'll take all the risk on it. Taj Mahal in 1977 was golden. Wow. He's still golden.
Yeah.
And I made my first concert money for real. I mean, not a commission, not getting paid for doing something, but a real earned out investment oriented commission. And I was thrilled. And I'm going, Jesus, I'm glad I hung out for this. I mean, it was like a $3,000 payday. I never had one of those ever close before, you know.
And he did well at the gate too, right? Taj did well.
Well, that's how I made the $3,000.
Yeah, well, that's the honest way. You know what's funny? I want to tell you a quick funny story about. I don't know when the last time you were down to Second Avenue where the Fillmore was, but it's now an immigrant savings bank.
Isn't that
Okay,
funny?
and on top of
Do you
that,
know, I was never in any Fillmore other than
oh,
the current rendition.
well, anyway, either you'll like it, I think you'll appreciate it anyway. Where the box office was, where we used to send the money in and get our tickets for 350 to see, Jethro Tull and the Who and whatever all on one act is now an ATM. So Bill would be like, "Money's leaving, money's going out. What's going on here, man?"
As long as they put their card in, Bill, you're making your 10%. Don't worry about it.
That's right. Hey, let me ask you something about Bill now, since we're going back, we circled back to Bill a bit. There was a very famous fight with Albert Grossman and Alan Lomax backstage at Newport, where they were rolling around in the dirt about Bob Dylan going electric. But I know there's a Bill Graham fight that you know about. I think it was
Yeah,
with Shep.
it was a beaut. He apparently Bill had insulted Shep's dad by throwing him out of backstage because he wasn't wearing his credentials. And I'm sure he said, "I'm Alice's dad," and Bill probably said, "Sure you are." They don't look alike at all. The hair, nothing's
No,
the
he just.
same. Anyway, Shep took exception to this when I guess he saw Bill putting him out past the other side of the gate, and he clocked him, and Bill clocked back. And for about 5 or 10 minutes, man, these guys had one of the worst knockdown drag fights that I've ever seen in my life of anybody. And those guys fought pretty good. They're a couple of tough Jews, and that's what they talked about afterwards. We're just a couple of Jews that like to roll around in arena floors.
Yeah, I know they made up about it, but it's funny. There
Oh,
was a lot of passion there.
oh boy. Well, I mean, some guys you can make a mistake with somebody's parent, and some guys you can't. And apparently, Shep wasn't having it. I didn't see the incident happen. It was only what I heard. But the funny part of it was a little earlier in the night, I'm doing security in front of the stage, right in the middle, and Alice is taunting me, holding Alice Cooper money over my head and holding posters over my head for people to grab at me, and then he'd pull it back, and tease everybody. But in the meantime, they're spitting at me and throwing punches at me because I won't get them the money and I won't do this. So one guy, big guy, he dropped his turquoise bracelet under my feet, which were up against the barricade, and my back was up against the stage to avoid being crushed. They didn't have barricades like they do now back then. So, I mean, they would have just crushed it. The stage would have crushed. I mean, it was mayhem. It was what an Alice Cooper show is supposed to be. Anyway, the guy was yelling at me, grab my bracelet. And I'm like this with my feet in front of me, and I'm literally off the ground. And he wants me to, I can't reach it. I got short arms. I'm a little guy. So I had a bike accident the week before when I was going down to Tucson, and my whole arm was a scab, and he ripped it off.
Oh God.
It was really gross. It was so, but even more so, it was really scary and ugly, and blood everywhere. And they were taking me to the medic when Bill and Shep ran me over.
Oh,
So
man.
now I needed my head looked at because they knocked my head against the ground. So yeah, it was a fun night, and I'm going, God, this is great. I'm gonna keep doing it. But see, this was in '73. It was before I did a thing.
Yeah.
This is before I promoted a show, and I was this close to all of this. I'm going, what a circus. This is great.
It's better than the show. Yeah.
Well, the show was phenomenal. Flo and Eddie opened. I mean, it was magic. And
now, I don't think Bill particularly liked the music either that Alice was doing. So I think that
no, I'm not.
Did it matter? Do you think it mattered to him?
No, I don't think so. I took Bill to his first Guns N' Roses show, and he wanted to go in there and smack Axl for taking so long to go on. I said, Bill, you can't do that. This is how it works. His audience puts up with it, and if you go do that, there's going to be no show tonight. Why don't we go to your house and smoke pot for a while?
Yeah, and that would help him.
So I got him out of there because, I said, and that's where I could sense that he was going, it's a different day.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so used to being in charge of everything as the boss, as the guy paying everything, and it being Bill. Nobody would begrudge him that, but things were changing in 1990, 91.
Well, he's looking, he's getting everything. He's doing what he normally does. He's just taking our own, going, I wouldn't do it this way, So, yeah. Hey, what about bringing rock and roll to Vegas? I mean, it's funny. Elvis did it and it failed the first time, but it wasn't really rock and roll the second time. It became spectacular, but actually bringing rock and roll to Vegas, were you in on the beginning of those ideas?
Well, no, I mean, there were rock shows that happened in Vegas, but not with any kind of regularity like we were having here in Phoenix and other cities. Vegas, like if I called up and made an offer for somebody, they would say, no, that's where old farts go to die.
Yeah.
And I don't want to play there. I want to play a regular place with the real tickets. And I don't want a bunch of guys with cigars in the front row who don't know who I am, and they're just
high rollers,
high rollers and all that stuff. So there was a lot of groups that resented and resisted the whole idea of going there because they thought of it as a musical graveyard. And in the early 80s, with my partners from Chicago, we little by little forced our way in. I remember a Stray Cats gig we did there at this place called the Convention Center. Forget it about the hotels. The hotels weren't having us.
No, not yet.
And then the Scorpions we did, and it was incredible. And the cops were true to form rednecks the whole time. They had dogs. These people weren't prepared. This is 40 years ago, and this kind of stuff, these presentations were just starting to happen. And keep in mind, in Vegas, most of those people who are working every night in those rooms, they're not seeing anything like this. None of the bombast of the rock shows that were coming. So we went in, it was either in 82 or 83, we forged a deal with a guy up there and started doing shows at the Aladdin Theater, which is now Planet Hollywood or Zappos or whatever it's called today. And it was the Aladdin for a long time. They had this beautiful 7,000 seater. The guy rented it for $20,000, but it doesn't sound like a lot if you're going to gross $500,000. But on our shows at the time, we'd be grossing $60,000 to $80,000, and this guy's taking 20 grand. He goes, I don't care what you do. This 20 grand is the rent. Everything else is on top, a la carte. So whatever you do, however you promote your show. So the groups would end up playing for a lot less than they normally would to play Vegas. There was a lot of groups that still wanted to do it and were curious about the whole thing, and the Frank Sinatra thing and all that, Rat Pack and all, everybody wanted Elvis. Everybody wanted to be a part of that. And this, remember, it's just the beginning of the 80s. So through the 80s, we did a bunch of shows and at the Aladdin. And then I started doing shows as a club thing. I added that into it. And then the Thomas and Mack Center opened up, which is the huge basketball arena for the university. And then after that, I mean, it took over 10, maybe, a little more than 10 years for the MGM to be built.
Right. Which is basically for rock and roll now. Yeah.
There was no MGM there. And then a few years later, Mandalay was built to compete with MGM. And I was close with both of them, and they were busy with other stuff too. So if I had a show for one place, oftentimes the other place would be booked, so they couldn't get mad at me for playing favorites. I wasn't. Some groups are bigger, and MGM was bigger, and I had a great deal at Mandalay, and then MGM had to go and buy them, which ended that. I mean, they were already a behemoth, MGM. It wasn't enough that they have the biggest hotel in the world.
No.
But then they got to buy their competition out. And,
you've seen that happen with the big promoting conglomerates, consuming smaller companies.
Well, I mean, that's a capitalistic approach in response to anybody that does good. Well, maybe we should own them too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I found, I
like
knew that from Bowery Presents, say in New York, everybody being taken in.
I can't put a finger on when all that started, but how about when they deregulated radio and you could own 7 stations in a market instead of 1?
Yeah,
that was Bill Clinton's move. Which
it's kind of a monopoly thing,
I like Bill Clinton, but I hate that he did that, because if he would have left that alone and stayed out of it, you'd have independent radio programming in every city of the country, and there would be 1 or 2 in each town you could actually listen to.
Yeah.
Well,
you remember, I mean, you knew Frank Zappa, of course, and you probably know Dweezil. Who's a great guy, and you actually auditioned for Frank on drums. Did he throw the black page in front of you?
No, it's so funny. Night before last, I watched the Hulu Frank Zappa 2-hour deal it was really well done. I really liked it, and I miss him, a lot after I saw that, because we had some great fun over the years together. But the first time I met him was in '73 at the Celebrity, and somehow I managed to meet Ruth and Ian Underwood, who were playing in the band. Yeah. And it was at the Celebrity Theater. But remember, I still hadn't promoted a show yet. But here I am weaseling backstage, hanging out with Frank. So Ruth brings me in to hang out with Frank. I'm tripping on mushrooms, okay?
Yeah.
And bad move, because Frank, I didn't know how bad Frank was hating about drugs, and it just seemed like a really good thing to do. It was the overnight sensation band before they had a vocalist. Mm-hmm. And I volunteered to Ruth, I would like to sing for you since you have nobody. I'm better than nothing. I know all the words to the past record. Put me in. So she brought me to Frank and told him that. She also said I was a guitar player, but I'm not a guitar player. I do play drums, but not well enough to play with Frank Zappa, but I could sing it well enough to do it. And this was just after Flo and Eddie, which was a very tough act to try and follow. And Frank goes, sure, come on over. I'll be at Ike Turner's Secret Sound over in Studio City.
Yeah.
Next week or the week after, whenever it was shortly after that. And I went over there. I mean, I had the studio phone number from her, and I called up, and he came out wearing his red SG Standard like he always does, and hair's tied back. His hair's tied back. He's smoking a Winston. He comes out. He puts his arm around me. He walks me towards the room, and he goes, "You can read, can't you?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, anything you want." He goes, "Music, you idiot." And I go, "No, I can't." He says, "Audition complete. Come back when you read." He goes, "Look, I made a promise to myself," because he goes, "You know how complex my music is."
Yeah.
And he goes, "But you, even if you don't play an instrument, you need to follow this stuff, so I don't have to teach every move to you. Otherwise, I'll just do it myself." Because my last groups, they were all grousing at me because I never let them contribute ideas, and then I have to remind them it's my band.
Mark and Howard couldn't read either,
but they were the Turtles.
But they were the Turtles, and also.
Wait a minute. Neither could Adrian Belew or Joe Satriani.
Nor could Ray Collins,
But again, they had serious talent. So what he was saying was, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
So
but he didn't want to.
I don't know if I was the first one he told that to. I'm sure I wasn't the last. But he just says, I'm tired of playing everybody else's parts on the record because they screw it up. And then they get pissed at me because I don't give them credit for playing. But I played it. I go, but they tried to play it and you did a better version. I mean, you got to include them. He goes, fuck them.
Well, no, it's kind of, it's understandable with that kind of a genius mind, you can't throw one past him. There's no curve. There's no ball he can't hit, man. Curveball, fastball, all of them.
It was impossible to get one by him. Not that you would want to. I mean, here's another guy who I had loved for not even 10 years, but I guess 65. Freak Out was probably the first thing I heard.
Yeah, great.
And we're only in it for the money. And Lumpy Gravy. I mean, I'm 12 or 11 listening to Lumpy Gravy. My mom and dad come downstairs, and it's the Varese stuff that he was influenced by, and they're going, what are you listening to? Why don't you listen to the Monkees like your friends?
There you go. Frank took from Gustav Holst, The Planets, that whole bit from Colony Vegetable, bum, 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 directly. And he would credit it, though. The modern day, Varese, and, the modern day Pachuco Refuses to Die. I mean, I read every word, I'm sure you did, on those albums, which is a missing thing now,
Yeah.
reading the liner notes and who it was and where it was recorded and all of that great stuff we got,
Everybody wants to know that kind of stuff. And now that they're not, because they're just taking a little cord and plugging it into a computer, you get none of that information unless you take the time to look it up, and barely got the time to do the download. What would these poor people do if they had to go browse a record shop for an hour to find out what was going on that week?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we always used to do. And I would generally always come out with something that they recommended, or I heard in the store, or I saw a great cover.
Yeah. And another thing that you as a promoter might appreciate, when I went in 68 and I'm 13, if I went to the Fillmore and there were 3 bands, I bought 3 records the next day. Even the opening act, I would find them because I had shared an experience, and it wasn't, I didn't go to YouTube to see them. I saw them live, and I got some great albums. I would see Humble Pie opening up, or one time Aerosmith at the Academy of Music opened up for Edgar Winter. And they were from Boston, so we were booing them right away because the Yankee Boston thing, And we said, get off the stage. They're from, and Joe Perry with his thick North End accent, everybody was like, but we went and bought their record because they were so good. And that was that trickle down thing. And Bill Graham started that, really putting 3 major acts on and 3 diversified acts.
Yeah. And at the time, with tickets, $3, $4, $5, $6.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was really getting paid that much. But again, it was the prestige of playing the main room that was getting talked about. Same thing in Vegas, same kind of thing that happens at Madison Square Gardens.
And another thing, there were no radius issues back then. Those radius issues, meaning I would see Johnny Winter at the Fillmore, and then the next week I would see him at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, and then out on Long Island and Connecticut. Today, that falls in a radius issue where you can't work for a month within the radius because there's too many.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is if you've ever been to New York trying to get to a show at 7:30 on a weekday night, I mean, there is something to be said about, getting rid of the radius thing. I've been out to the Capitol a couple of times, and it's a schlep.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's like a good hour to an hour and a half from the city, even though the distance isn't that far, but getting there and getting back, it takes a long time.
Yeah, and Howard Stein had 2 rooms. He had one in Passaic and one in Long Island. So
serve the public, man. Serve the public.
And you would see Mountain at 4 different places in 2 weeks, and it was okay. And all of them were sold out.
And now, and everybody's so territorial about things. And it's so funny. The ones that squawk the loudest are the ones who own the business.
Right. Yeah.
Like, okay, it isn't enough that you are the company that has either all of the best concert promoters in the country or the world under one roof and their staffs, but you also have to own the ticketing company as well.
Yeah.
So if we go book a show somewhere, we have to share all of our information with them. They just get it automatically. They keep it.
And people buy up blocks, right? Blocks of tickets go before the public even gets them.
I suppose I haven't seen that happen, but I guess anything could happen. And, when I sold, it was in 01. I just finished the 90s, which were fantastically successful. But I was beat, and they offered me a lot of money. So I took it. And that was what SFX was. That was the guy, Robert Sillerman, who bought that. And he bought all of his promoters, and he banded us together. And what we didn't know is his whole end game was to put it off onto Clear Channel for over $4 billion. And while he was selling that to them, and boy, he must have done a great job, because those people at Clear Channel billions and billions of assets with all those radio stations and billboards. None of them bothered to look and see how reasonable it would be to pay that $4 billion loan back to the bank. So here we were, us goofy little loser promoters were only generating 150 to 175 net million a year.
A million, yeah.
But that's nothing when you're paying 5% on $4 billion. Yeah. So now you're losing 25 to 50 million because you got to pay that loan back too. So nobody was making any profit. And then Clear Channel made some deal with the government to divest themselves of the concert part of it. And that's what became Live Nation. So I was with those first two for 5 years and then Live Nation for another 5. And after my contract expired, we ended that. And I went back on my own, and that's been 10 years already. And I've had a great time after being away from my own, wherewithal for 10 years. And I've done better in these 10 years than I did in the previous 10 years, financially and mentally, emotionally.
Do you think, do you have any thoughts about how this situation we're in the world is going to pan out for, or any future for concerts at this point? What are we going to look at? What's it going to look like? Is there any? Is it anybody's game at this point, or is it
kind of, but not really? I mean, on one hand, you hear about numbers spiking. On the other hand, you have the same people saying, "Well, there's less deaths, there's less people in hospitals, but there's a lot of cases." And the last thing that we want to do is add more shows and then have somebody from the government step in and say, we can't have more than 50 people in the same place. Now, that seems to be a thing of the past. I hope it remains there. Frankly, in our state, it's pretty wide open. I was in Scottsdale last night in a bar, and nobody was masked up. It was, everybody was drinking. Yeah. It wasn't jam-packed, but it had a lot of people in it. But I could move around pretty easily with it. But I didn't feel sick at all about it. I mean, I haven't had a problem whatsoever. I've got my vaccinations, and I've stayed pretty clear of a lot of things for a long time. Now, what happens? I don't know. I mean, today, I want to book a show next week. I want to start. I want to have shows immediately. But the thing is, in renting out halls and then making deals with bands, these guys that I work with like to make money, and as badly as they want to perform, they can't go out at a loss either by playing to half of the house.
I know you're going to see duos and trios, and not.
Well, that might be, or you might not see certain acts at all until they can perform the way they want. And many of these bigger acts have the means to sit it out and wait. And
but I feel bad for the crew, and all those guys don't have the means, and that's that's why we're trying to help people with certain charities and stuff in the music.
Absolutely, I'm right with you. I feel like most of the bigger bands and the people who have been in their employ for any number of years, I'm sure they're getting covered.
There's some retaining.
Some people are able to do that, and some people aren't.
Do you have the book? You can hold it. You can hold it up since I don't have one.
You bet your butt I do.
Yeah. And before we get into okay, so now here it is, All Excess.
Now, I don't know if it's glaring too much. Here, let me do this.
No, it looks pretty good. Yeah.
So see this picture. This is after the Pink Floyd show when they came back with the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour in 1988, and my security guy advised me to buy parking lots near the stadium because the parking lot that they had would only hold 2,500 cars, and they needed room for 8,000 cars. Oh. So he says, "Give me 10 grand in cash. I'll go buy all the lots, and we'll staff them. We'll put lights in them, and they'll be safe. And people pay $10 a car." And it was in '88, so I mean, just a few years before, we weren't even charging $10 for but
that's a spectacle to be seen.
So yes, yeah. So we had 2 nights with Floyd, and it's a very long story, but the long and short of that picture in the cover of the book and All Excess is that's 40 grand in cash and cassette boxes that was brought to me for my share of the parking. And I made more money off the parking than I did on the show.
Well, see,
And
that's why Bill went into t-shirts.
right. It was perfectly within my, my ability to go ahead and do that. A lot of people said, don't use that picture. You look like a Colombian drug lord.
Oh, it's
And
great. It's
I
great. You
think it's
need
a
that.
great
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, it's
I
got
think
to
it's fun.
grab you. The picture has to grab you, man. But I know that my producer here will send me a copy of that book. Is it
There
on
you go.
tape or anything though? Did you do it on tape? Or?
I haven't. I've thought about doing some like chapters on Facebook Live or something like that. Frankly, I don't know if the demand would be there and give me the reward that I need for doing that. And when I'm saying, I mean, it's like I don't need to be compensated by it, but like we went way out of our way to do Kindles. I had to reformat the whole book
Oh
because
yeah.
I made a different version of the book to begin with. So in order to get on Kindle, that's what we had to do. And I spent thousands of dollars reformatting the book for that. And I think it's going to pan out. What's going to happen is once the shows come back and I can have my books available at the concert.
There you go.
I'll move 20 or 30 a show and I won't be advertising it anymore.
Oh, that'll be great. So let's back up a bit now. And I'm glad you had your own book. Would you tell me something about your situation with your cancer? Was it a scare or was it?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I didn't know I had it like most people don't, but there's a guy called John Barrick, and he has a golf tournament out at Pebble Beach every year, and he's been doing it since the 70s. And he does it with Tom Kelly, who's the songwriter who, among other songs, he wrote Like a Virgin, True Colors. He wrote some heart songs. He's written some really, really great big songs. Great guy. So anyway, it's the Kelly Barrick Open. So I was out there and I'm there with my wife, and this was in 2003. And I was much bigger than I am now, probably 40 to 50 pounds bigger on a 5'7" frame. I mean, I'm carrying 5 extra bowling balls with me, right? and the bottom line is I was just out of my mind, drinking, eating anything I wanted, and all of it, not half of it or not a portion of it. So I knew nothing about control because, I grew up in a middle-class thing where everything was measured. And then once you start making some dough, it's so easy to slip and fall into that table backstage where all the good stuff is after dinner.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Or you're especially hungry and the guy's made something fantastic. This guy used to make me the best blue cheese in the world. I'd eat the whole container with a little bit of lettuce.
Yeah, and then pick the crumbs off your shirt when you
and then eat them, right?
Yeah.
So I got to Pebble Beach, and I love Pebble Beach. It's like one of the most classic places on earth. It just beats you up, the wind, the rain, whatever, but it's gorgeous. And I'm playing it around 5th, 6th hole. I go back, oh God, the hell was that? And it like knocked me over, I mean, it was like like somebody just knifed me. So I got up, I literally fell. I got up and I took a slow swing. I put a ball about 200 yards, about 3 feet from the cup with my new improved slower swing to accommodate for the pain. And I went from that hole to the 12th hole 2 under. And I'm not that good. I mean, I'm okay. On a normal game, on a normal course, I'll shoot between 85 and 90. Not great, but okay. I can play with anybody. And I'm having this great round, and all of a sudden I looked at the stupid scorecard and I realized how good I was playing, and I screwed up the rest of the game. But the bottom line was I learned how to avoid this pain that was in my colon, and I didn't realize that it was my colon. When you have something like that come out of nowhere, you feel like it's something that's going to pass.
I pulled a muscle, whatever. Yeah.
Kind of like the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I get it. I
thought we were, going to be over that in a few weeks or a month or whatever. But anyway, how wrong we were. Would have been nice if somebody's looking after us, wouldn't it? But let's not get into that.
Yeah, no, we all know. Yeah.
All well documented. So anyway, during the game, I'm drinking ice water, I'm drinking coffee, because every time I have something, it kind of cools me off, makes me feel better, pacifies me. And then I said, well, that ain't working. So also I tried some tequila, and that worked very nicely. It numbed the pain a little bit. I still didn't know what was going on. So when I got back to Phoenix, I was sitting in my office and I'm working, and one of the girls comes in. She goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "Plenty, but what do you mean?" And she goes, "You're crying." And I go, and my face was soaked from pain, but I didn't realize. I just said, "Screw it." And I kept working. So I called my doctor, because emergency room now. I go to the emergency room. I'm there the rest of the day, and they thought it was, what's the thing with the air bubble in your, I can't think of the name.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyway, begins with a D. Anyway, they thought it was something else. They did the solutions and the nuclear stuff, and they couldn't find anything. So they said, "You need a colonoscopy." I never even heard of a colonoscopy. So, and I couldn't go for a while. So I did the only thing that you should do when you don't know what's going on with your health. We went to Alaska with Stephen Wright. And now we had a blast. And then,
what a great guy.
What a great guy. And then came back, had the colonoscopy, and I knew the doctor that was doing it. I said, "Look, if there's anything wrong, don't mess around. When I come out of my your induced coma that you're going to put me in, don't wait, just say it." And he goes, "Okay." So I'm laying in the bed afterwards. I look up, I see him, and he goes, I go, "Dude, what?" He goes, "Yeah, you got it. You got it bad." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, see this picture?" And he showed me this picture that looked like Zuul in the refrigerator in Ghostbusters.
Yes. I know well who Zuul is. Oh my God.
So
yeah.
Zuul was
your
living,
ass.
Zuul was living in my colon. Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
So he goes, "Fortunately for me, I was kind of anticipating something based on where you said your pain was. So when I approached there with the scope, I knew, I saw it coming, and like if I would have," he goes, "if I would have pressed through that, you're dead, because that stuff would have gone everywhere." He goes, he goes, "Let's hope it's all contained, like right there." He goes, "I didn't touch it. I didn't even get close to it. I saw it. Here's the picture of it. It was the grossest picture I've ever seen, because I knew what it was, and it was in me, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get that out of there." So I said, "So what do I do next?" They go, "You got to find a surgeon." I go, "How do I do that?" They go, "Yellow Pages, whatever you want. We can't tell you who to go to."
Wow.
So I got some referrals, but doctors aren't supposed to refer you to other doctors for things like that, because if something goes sideways, they can get sued. And, and it's not their fault. They just made a tip. So I went to Mayall, and they were great people. And I was in there for 11 days. Very, very long. You know what day I went in there? You would remember. Remember when Moises Alou missed that ball at the Cubs game?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. So while that game was going on, I was drinking the solution that cleans you out. And the next day I was going in for surgery. I get in there for surgery, and my blood pressure was 210/130. So they said, "We can't operate on you because you will die. So we got to calm you down." I said, "I got a great idea. How about I go down? I check out. I'll go to the steakhouse tonight, have myself a mighty steak and a big old bottle of wine. We'll come back here on Monday and do it all over again." He goes, "I got a better idea. No, you're going to bed until Monday, and then you're going to get operated on." That was the long and short of it was, I did chemo for 6 months, and I've done my tests, and I'm fine.
And you're here. God bless, man.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you, man. And we can pick it up again sometime. But hey, do you ever see Jimmy Bowen there golfing out in Arizona? Jimmy Bowen.
No.
Yeah, no.
I don't even know that he lives here. If you talk to him, tell him to call me.
Yeah, he starts at it's so hot. He used to go out at 4:35 in the morning and start golfing.
Well, he must be great playing
when the sunlight comes up.
Guys, I promised Cause you're going to get me in trouble.
All right, I'm going to go. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Later.
Talk
We'll
to
have you back,
Thanks,
Danny.
Steve.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care.
Bye,
Okay.
Jimmy.
Bye.